Elliott Hulse started to gain popularity in the midst of the red pill movement. And to be honest with you, I wasn't a big fan when I first saw the stuff he was putting out. But as I learned who he was and as his message started to really mature, I found out that he wasn't the misogynist that people said he was. He wasn't the extremist that people tried to paint him as. He's actually a really good guy with a really good heart and who wants to help men be better men, which is why we asked him to be on the Manlihood ManCast. We're going to get into the interview right after this.
Are you ready to live life to the full? Are you ready to rise up and live a life of honor? Are you ready to boldly step into a life of courage? This is the Manlihood ManCast, and here's your host, Josh Atcher.
Elliot, it is great to have you on the show today, man. I've been following your work for quite some time, and you have a really inspiring and encouraging message that I think really is important these days. And it's kind of cool to see, it seems like you're willing to say things that a lot of people aren't willing to say. And I think is needed today,
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, Elliot, I see from your website and the stuff you do, you talk a lot about strength and how men need to be strong. What does that look like in your own life, man? Where did that come from? What inspired you to push towards that?
I'm grateful to have something that a lot of young men growing up today didn't have, and that's a strong father in the home. My dad is from Belize. Both of my parents are from Belize, and they didn't grow up with the same type of effeminate training and blue pill ideology that most American men have received from the time we were born, through the media and through the music and through the schools. He literally grew up in the jungle, chasing animals and climbing trees and being barefoot. And so when he came here and had his children, he raised us with the same sort of hearty, back to the earth, traditional value lifestyle that he knew and that maybe our great grandfathers knew, but no longer experienced here. When I was a kid, I kind of resented my dad because he was tough, right? None of my friends had tough dads. My dad was disciplined and had boundaries, and there were things we could and couldn't do. And this was very odd, I guess, when comparing myself to my neighbors and, the kids that I went to school with. And so when I started having my own children, when I started a family at age 23, I quickly discovered that my dad was right all along. He's like one of these people that you would call like a toxic masculinity, right? And I thought my dad was toxic. I was like, I don't want to be like my dad. But it didn't take long for me to realize that if I don't behave in a stern, stoic, straightforward, disciplined, committed fashion with my wife and children, then I'm going to suffer the fate, and my family's going to suffer the fate of many American men, which we know is the demise is the destruction of the family, divorce and broken homes and fatherless children. And as I continued mentoring young men in the gym to grow stronger through lifting, they would come to me with questions. And I quickly found myself in a position of being like a father figure, or maybe a big brother or uncle, answering questions that their fathers couldn't answer, that luckily I had perspective on. And so here we are today, where not only do I help men grow stronger in the gym, right? I am a strength coach, but also in their lives. Yeah,
I kind of have a similar story where, I had an amazing father who taught me right from wrong. And I can't tell you how many times I found myself repeating the words I swore I would never say when my kids came along. I think that's kind of the way it works, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like the question, do you want a spanking?
Same here.
Of course Of course they don't want a spanking, but you're going to ask anyway. Do you want a spanking?
Yeah, one of my dad's favorite lines is, "I'm the bad guy." He's
right.
like, "If you hate me, I don't care, but I got to do what I got to do. And if that means I'm the bad guy, then that's fine." And I find myself being the bad guy quite a bit, not just at home, but of course online and when I'm answering questions.
I mean, obviously we balance it also with love and affection. I mean, even as a tough guy dad, your kids still need a hug. They still need to know you're proud of them and that you love them, You talked about this a little bit when you talked about kind of what's happened to our culture around us. What do you think, in your perspective, happened where men stopped being strong? What do you think that breakdown? Where did it come from?
Well, there has been a movement towards this emasculation of the men and the removal of the father from the home for a very long time. But I would pinpoint the escalation happening around 1917, about the time of the Bolshevik Revolution in Europe, when the Marxists discovered that, well, we can only go so far with bombs and bullets and war. If we're going to take down the entire West, we have to do it with what Antonio Gramsci, one of the founders of cultural Marxism, called cultural Marxism, the long march to the institutions. And what he realized was that if we were going to destroy, if we were going to take over the West, we were going to change the culture and make it more subservient to their new world order designs, then two things, which is essentially one thing, need to happen. Number one, they've got to get the fathers out of the home. They've got to, and the way you get the fathers out of the home is through the various movements like feminism, with this idea of pitting the genders against one another and perverting the gender roles and making women and children dependent on the state, putting men to shame in a myriad of different ways, but mainly through the culture, right? Like, you don't see very many strong dads in the media at all anymore. We went from like the Cleavers, right? Like in the 1950s. And, the dad was a good dad. He was always giving lessons and he was there for the kids. And, he was a stern father and gave boundaries to, the Homer Simpson types that we see on TV. So Antonio Gramsci knew that if they could infiltrate the schools, they could infiltrate the media, the music, and so forth, and pervert the genders, again, turn women into men, essentially, and turn men into women, that the people would be that much more easily to be manipulated. But this removal of the father is twofold. It's not just the removal of the head of the family, right? And all that's associated with it, but it was also to de-Christianize the West. He understood, as Marxists understand, that a people who are serving their God, serving their Lord, God the Father, are not going to bend and yield so quickly to the demise of the devil through their vicious plans. And so, as you've seen over the past 100 years, it's been about a 100-year span, we've essentially became atheists, right? There's really no faith, very little hope, very little purpose for man and mankind, and as well as the total destruction of the family. So you could say that they're winning, and they really are, if you just look at gender relations in the world today.
Yeah, it's interesting because, when you look at feminism, the concept, right? The concept is women should be treated equal to men. I agree with that. I think most people agree with that. But what happened is even that has become women are the same as men, or women are better than men. And I don't see any other explanation for it myself either than, that cultural Marxism, which I don't even know if a lot of people understand it or even accept that that's what's happening. But I think that I really do. I believe 100%. I think that that's where masculinity and the family and really our whole culture has fallen. We've been infiltrated by philosophies that are dangerous, you know?
Yeah, anti-life philosophies.
And, you know, I understand that, you know, okay, so we're living in a new age and there are people that don't think they need God in their life. You know, I need God in my life. I can't survive without it, you know, but, and the cool thing about God is he gives us the freedom to choose him or not choose him. But I don't understand this, this almost Christian viewpoint that's out there, to the point where it's tolerance for everything and everybody except, you know, the straight Christian male or whatever, you know. I mean, I don't like to fall into the persecution mindset, you know, victim mentality. I don't want to play into that, but I do believe that there are forces out there, man, that want us destroyed, you know.
What better time to rise up than during these types of challenges, right? This is when we're tested, right, as men. So I believe that our generation is the one is expected to be the remnant and the one to turn it around. And that's why it's so important for the work that you do and the work that I do to wake men back up again. The things you're talking about in your podcast and things I'm speaking about with young men, we didn't learn from our fathers or our grandfathers. They may not have even known. So there really is a great awakening happening. And it has to, as with all great movements, begin with men. Women aren't going to do it. They can't do it. It's not their responsibility to do it. It's really up to us. And so the very first step is we've got to be able to take those blue pill glasses off and see how we've been manipulated into this subservient role in society, rather than being the leaders in our homes and being leaders in our communities as we're designed to be.
I think too, and I think you may agree with me here, you know, a lot of people say, well, how do we change this? Is it too late? Is culture gone? And I'm always like, look, you got 4 kids at home. That's where you start. You know, you start by raising up that generation to do right. You know, I'm assuming that that's kind of, I mean, obviously, I think we all have varying degrees of influence. And so, you know, you've got a really big influence. You know, you could have kept your YouTube channel about fitness, you know, and only talked about that, but you saw that need to do more with it, you know?
Yeah.
So what do you think is kind of our next step? How do we, you know, I know there's a lot of guys at home, especially who, again, didn't have that father figure, you know, where do they go from here? Like, look, I don't like what society has done to me and where I'm at. How do I change this? What would you say to those guys?
Well, you know, I am convinced that we're going to have some struggles. It's going to be tough. Maybe this is the time where it doesn't literally turn around, but we've got to be able to see what's happening and start making moves in the right direction. And the family is the nucleus of the society. As the family goes, so does the nation. And the family is divided. The family is divided. And, you know, say what you will about feminism, but, you know, its origins, or its so-called origin, in the suffrage movement and making women, you know, be able to vote. Bottom line is it divided the family, and it started to, once you divide the husband and the wife in the home by having politicians cater to the desires of the woman and then separating that from the desires of the man, now the family is completely split. So you've got completely different values in the home. And so what has to happen in order for the culture to once again become cohesive is for the family to become cohesive again. And when you ask me, what is it that we need to do? But if you look at the work of Eric Hoffer, who he studied the archetype of revolutions, how things happen. One of the things he says that there's 3 types of men in every revolution. There's the men of words, there's the men of action, and the men of pragmatic action. And so I'm convinced we're still in the time of the man of words. If you think about the American Revolution, you have Thomas Paine, right, who's the man of words. He wrote Common Sense. Then you would have George Washington, man of action. He put the army together in order to resist. And then men of pragmatic action like Jefferson, who now wrote a new constitution. Where we are right now, it's imperative for us to speak up and that's why, you say sometimes I speak in a countercultural way that, turns people off. I'm not trying to piss people off. What I'm trying to do is to wake them up. And sometimes you need a loud, annoying alarm clock to get you up out of your bed. If not, the world will show you, but maybe it'll be too late.
I think I agree with you 100% there. I think that somebody's got to be that Paul Revere, and say, come on, the British are coming.
Right.
Let's change things. So it actually, that actually brings up something kind of interesting, because I remember when I first found you, someone had sent me one of your videos. This was years and years ago. And my first impression of Elliot was, I don't like this guy. It was kind of cocky, and then but I paid attention. And I hit subscribe on the YouTube channel, and I watched, and I think two things happened. I think one, I realized, yeah, this guy is the town crier ringing the bell saying, pay attention. And the other thing that happened, and I think this is just, like I said, this has been years that I've been kind of watching what you're doing. I think there's also a level of maturity in your own self too, that I've seen, you know what I mean? Where it's like, yeah, okay, I'm going to be the annoying guy who's going to tell you the truth. But I think there's not a softening, but a, diplomacy that has kind of entered into your life a little bit. At least that's just like I said, I don't know if you can attest to that, or if you still think that there's not a difference, but I've seen that kind of grow in there. And I think it's actually put you in a unique position where, you're not just a musclehead with a little bit of knowledge. You're actually somebody that knows what he's talking about. And, I think people would be suited well if they pay attention. Would you say that's true? Over the years that maybe that your message has been refined a little bit from maybe where you started? Only
because my vision has gotten clearer and my mission has become more substantial. I knew that something was wrong. I knew that something wasn't right. And I think a lot of people can sense that. We just don't know where to look, right? There's this sense of emptiness, meaninglessness. One of the biggest challenge for young men, I would say, especially those that come to me for help, are knowing who they are and why they're here, right? This is an existential question, one of which, maybe generations ago, only the wealthy, only the monks, only the people who had time to think about that stuff, they would ponder, right? These were the great minds that came up with philosophy. While every other man, worked and did what was in front of him, and he raised his family, and he, did the best that he could with what he had. Where today, because luxury is so omnipresent, because life is so easy, because there's so much, there's comfort and there's, convenience. All these things were thought to make our lives better, but in a way it's made us more bored. And as a result of being more bored, ask more questions. And when we ask more questions and we start to dig in and realize that they can't be answered, we hit a crisis. So for myself, once that crisis moment happened, right, I must have been in my mid-30s, I began to realize that the key that's missing, the missing puzzle piece here, is the initiation of boys into manhood, and the mission that's relayed to them about what it is to be a man, working itself out into the world, particularly as it relates to family. Once when my wife's father died, something came over me. I had a series of really strange dreams, and I started to have this word father. It was just repeated over and over again into my consciousness. And so it was about that time that I started to take my role as a father in the home to a level that I didn't even know existed. I thought I was doing everything I could do, but I really wasn't. I was being way too soft. And then realizing, wow, the big missing piece for most men in this world, the men that I mentor to, are fathers. And so now that I know that I'm focused now, and no one can knock me off my horse because I know what it is I'm after. It's not willy-nilly. My daughters, we had a misunderstanding. My daughters, not too long ago, they saw people make videos tearing me apart. They're like, oh, this guy's a misogynist and he hates women. I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. I've been married to the same woman for 25 years and I got 3 daughters. I don't hate women. But one of my daughters caught wind of another YouTuber, this, overweight fembot that had like a big ring through her nose, was calling me all these names and making me look really bad. And my daughter watched the video and she was upset with me, like, Dad, this is, you're wrong. And it didn't take long for me to point around and point to her house, point to our family, point to their mother and show her, daughter, you have to understand something. No matter what comes out of my mouth, my underlying goal is the same, and that is to make families work again. You're blessed. You're lucky. You come from a family with a mother and a father, both who love each other, respect each other, and raise their children with traditional values. If you go by the way of the world that hates the family, that hates masculinity, you're going to fall into the same satanic trap that has caused the loss of millions of innocent lives through abortion and the destruction of millions of family through divorce and other offsprings of feminism.
Yeah, it's funny that you talk about your daughter kind of discovering the the things they say about you and having her own little crisis there. I can picture that process. Do you think that she came around? Did she understand what you were saying after you explained it?
Well, the proof is in the pudding, they say, right? You'll not know somebody by what they say. You know people by what they do and how they live. And that's why I said all you need to do was point to their mother and say, is your mother an oppressed woman? Do I oppress or suppress or hold back your mother? Your mother has everything. She has an amazing life. She has everything that a woman that wants to have children could possibly dream of. So I don't have to tell you anything. I'm just asking you to look around. What do you see? How do I treat you as my daughters? What kind of values do I instill into you? What do I do for you that shows the truth of my heart when I say the things that I say? And there's no refuting it. I have like I said, I have a marriage of how many married? We started dating when we were 14 years old. So I've been with my wife over 25 years. We have been married for going on 20 years. We've got 3 daughters. She and I, their mother and I have, and my daughters know this, we have the best relationship of any married family that they even know. And half the families that they know they're divorced. So I'm like, just look, babe, just look. If the world is telling you one thing, look at the fruits of what they're saying. These people who tear me down, especially the feminists who tear me down, these are not happy people. They don't have nice families. They don't have good relationships with their spouse or anything at all. These are perverted people who have wrong thinking about who they are, what they are, and why they're here. They've lost the foundation of what makes a people, a society, worth its weight. And that is men and women coming together, playing their roles, building a family, and being the nucleus of society. It boils right down to that. And if you could show me that you're making that happen with the things that you're saying out there, then great. But if all you show me is whining, complaining, denigrating, but yet you have nothing to prove for it, you have this, this young lady who made my video, she obviously, no man will deal with her. No man would put up with her unless he's some sort of a simp, and guarantee that she's going to relay values to her children that are not life sustaining. I'm sure they're all pro baby killers, pro contraception, pro divorce, pro big government coming in and taking over the family through the divorce courts. And it's a mess. And so I stand for everything that's the opposite of the predominant cultural mean.
We have a similar story. We got married young, had twins on our 1-year wedding anniversary, had 2 more kids after that. And so we've only got 1 left at home now. Most of them are grown, and I'm actually going to be a grandpa here pretty soon. Probably by the time this airs, I'll be a grandpa. Oh, and
congrats.
Dude, yeah, it's awesome. It's exciting. But, I look at it and we did things different and people thought we were crazy, right. They're like, why are you getting married so young? Is she pregnant? No, she's not pregnant. We're in love. And this is what we're going to do. And then, they're like, right. Why did you have babies so soon? Twins. How are you going to, that's going to be no, that's a blessing, man. Like, that's like right. The biggest victory in my life was holding those kids as they all popped out of their mom, I mean, right. And was it hard? Yes, it was hard. There were sacrifices that you have to make. Like raising a family is not easy, but it's the most satisfying and rewarding thing I've ever done.
It's the best thing that we can do. I don't think there's a more noble calling for a man and woman. And I was listening to the exposition of Genesis 6 by John MacArthur, and he started to explain how marriage is the greatest blessing. Marriage is the greatest gift that God has given us, and in order for us to be fruitful and to multiply. Each child is an added blessing. I think it is the pinnacle of being a man.
Yeah. Honestly, that was the moment that I knew. I mean, I know that, like I said, I had a great dad. I don't know that there was a moment where he's like, okay, you're a man now, son, which I do kind of look back, and I tried to make sure I gave my boys that. But when my twins were born, dude, you're like nothing has ever felt more manly than holding those newborn babies. I mean, that's like, I made that, or at least I helped.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
So how old are your kids now?
11, 13, 15, 17.
Awesome. So you're not too far off from that. They enter the world and they go out and they do their thing. And dude, I'm telling you, man, there's some awesome pride when those things happen. Right now they're going to go somewhere and they're going to say, hey, I know your dad, but that's about to flip, dude. Like they're going to go out and make their mark, and they'll be like, you'll become their dad rather than them becoming your kid. You know what I mean? Like the whole thing shifts, and
I like the way you put that.
It's a pretty cool moment, where they become the stars. My daughter is an insurance agent, and her, she was an insurance agent. Now she's going to be a mom. So, which is pretty cool, but her face was plastered all over billboards all over town. And I was like driving around town, like, I made that.
That's my daughter. That's great, man. Congrats. Yep. You're doing it, brother.
So you've got a lot of guys, obviously, they're coming to you and they're like, look, I want to be a man. Like I want to be strong internally, externally. What does that process look like for them? How do you walk them through that process of really entering into and embracing the manhood that they have?
Well, one of the things that we've lost with modernity is an important process that anthropologists like Mircea Eliade recognize. There's a cross-cultural pattern of male initiation. And so I'll briefly I'll give you the big picture view, talk about where we're dropping the ball, but then talk about the details of masculine initiation, because no one's doing it for us. Our elders are not available any longer. Most of them don't even know this. Well, the very first thing that needs to happen, and this, again, like I say, this is cross-cultural. You can even look into many myth stories, origin stories, Parsifal and the golden, or the Fisher King and things of that nature. It's even in the Bible in Genesis, that there's a requirement for a boy once he starts to become a man, right? Testosterone starts coming up, where he goes from being a child to a teenager, in essence, where a very important thing needs to happen. Number one, there needs to be a movement away from the world of the mother. And so what is meant by a movement away from the world of the mother? Of course, number one is there needs to be a movement away from the mother herself. And if you look at, interesting books like Iron John, a book about men, he talks about how even the Cherokee, when a young man would become a certain age, the old initiators would take him, as was tradition, remove him from the realm of the mother, the word of the mother, and then atonement, the world of the father. I'll talk about that in a moment. But once that process has been completed, the boy then no longer associates with his mother the same way. They say that it's important for him not to look into his mother's eyes any longer, and that in order to communicate with his mother, he has to do it through his sisters or somebody else. You may ask yourself, like, wow, that's very strange. Why would a boy need to be removed in that fashion from the love of his mother? Well, if that doesn't happen, the boy continues to live an effeminate life. He still remains half mama boy, but in a big man's body. And that's what we have today, because we have a situation where there really are no fathers. There are very few fathers left, and single mothers rule the roost. And so even if there's a two-parent home, for the most part, the mom stays too involved, overly involved in the life of the young man, when in fact, when that transition period is supposed to happen, the father then should be becoming the main mentor. Mother is main mentor up until about age 12 for a boy. But after that, mother no longer sits in that primary role of mentor. The father, the grandfathers, the uncles, the great-grandfather, the men of the tribe are supposed to take that over in order to make that boy into a worthy masculine part of the culture. Again, like I said, today you have like 6'6", 300-pound offensive linemen who, you say anything about their mama and they start crying. Don't say nothing about my mama, right? And the first thing you want to do when they become successful, they want to, buy, mama, I'm going to save you. Mama, I'm going to buy you a house. And mama, even Drake in that one song, he says to the girl that wants to be with him, I don't love you. I only love my mama. I only love my bed and my mama. We live in a culture of mama's boys. We have not received the proper separation from our mothers. And so some of the ways that ends up in our carrying with us through our lives, whether our mom is conscious of that or she's actually actively involved in our lives, is not the case. The world of the mother is also synonymous with the world of material or matrix. The word matriarchy, mother, material, matrix, these are all associated with creature comforts, sensual gratification, right? Addictions, right? Things that make us feel good. Addiction to porn, addiction to sex, right? Chasing girls to fulfill that hole that their mother left in their heart. I think a lot of young men, man, they get these big broken hearts because they allow themselves first to lust for these girls, but then they fall in love and hope this woman can fill the place that their mother once did. And so you got a lot of grown men, married men, that treat and think of their wives like a substitute mother. And this doesn't make for good polarity in the home. So any kind of material addiction or hankering or neediness comes from this lack of separation from the mother. That's one half of the equation. That's critical. That has to happen. A boy needs to move away from his mother. But with that then is the atonement with the world of the father. The world, as opposed to the world of the mother, which is material comfort, the world of the father is spirit. The word father comes from paternity, paternal, right? Patriarchy, even patriotism, which comes from the word pattern. Pattern is another word for archetype, the spiritual world. So it's a movement away. What has to happen is a movement away from flesh to spirit, from mother to father. And that movement towards the father is rife with first challenges, austerity, and the breaking down of the mommy boy mindset. Once that's been established, the boy becomes a tabula rasa, a clean slate for the imprint of the masculine frame for that society. That means he doesn't come back into the tribe until he receives his masculine mission. And for the most part, prior to, like the Industrial Revolution and such, that was a matter of protecting and providing, right? Being a strong, stoic, supportive, able-bodied boundary keeper to support everything that's happening on the inside. Who's on the inside? The women and the children. So it was incumbent upon these men to be tough men, to be strong men, to be mission purpose men in order to protect that which is valuable on the inside. That whole process, and even the byproduct of that process, the outcome of that process seems so foreign to us today on so many different levels. And it's the key, it's the root of why we're suffering.
So culturally, we have then abandoned that model of initiation. I think of the African proverb that says, if the boys aren't initiated, they'll burn down the village. I think that's definitely what we're seeing now.
Oh, yeah.
So the man comes to you and he says, I want to be a better man. I don't know what this means. Do you have an initiation that you work them through or walk them through? What does that look like?
So I'm going to pull a page straight out of Jesse Lee Peterson's book, where he asserts that for any man to become a man, he must first, like I said before, separate from the mother. But what does that look like? Forgiveness. This is his contention, and I believe that it's true. And we need to separate from our mother and forgive her. Forgive both of our parents, but as long as there's any emotional content associated with the mother, you're trapped by her. So if you're overly attached, meaning, loving your mother too much, there's 100% an inappropriate attachment to the mother in our society, and an over-attachment by the sons. It doesn't mean don't love your mother, but there's a unresourceful bond there that needs to be broken. And that bond is emotional. And so any emotional content that you have towards your mother needs to be explored and dealt with. And for the most part, at least according to JLP, there needs to be a forgiveness. There needs to be because once you forgive, then you can let go. And so to forgive the mother, and it just sounds kind of strange because a lot of times you're like, well, my mom didn't do anything wrong. Well, you might not be conscious of it, but that unresourceful bond with the mother is one that she wants to keep. It's in a mother's nature to want to keep her boys safe, right? To keep her babies close, no matter how old they get. Mama always wants to be there to take care of you. If you look at what happened to Parsifal in The Fisher King, when he saw the warriors galloping past the tent that he and his mom lived in, he knew right away that that's what I need to go do. And he leaves his mom. But the part of that speaks to the human condition is that the mother dies. He goes, and because he leaves, she dies of a broken heart. Nobody wants to break their mom's heart, right? And so there's this sense of guilt sometimes that's associated with it. All that has to be broken. And that's just the beginning, because the mommy addiction is also associated with sex addiction, pornography addiction, masturbating, addiction to food, sugar, sweets, junk food, addiction to drugs, alcohol, any kind of self-soothing that we engage in is a form of trying to fill the mommy hole. And so what has to happen, number one, you have to become aware of your subtle addictions, and they're everywhere, right? I took some time to explore the addiction to these phones. And and people treat them like a drug. Like if they don't have their phone first thing in the morning and last thing at night, they'll freak out. You ever see somebody like lose their phone? They can't find their phone. They're frantic. And it's because it's a feel good drug, right? And so we got to explore, where are we attached? Where do we have these subtle addictions? And just like I said before, when that movement towards the father happens, there's an intermediary called a rites of passage. The rites of passage is always associated with austerity. It's always associated with challenges. So one of the things that we could do, and I see a lot of young men doing it today, and I'm proud to see them when they do it, are to go on these fasts, right? You can fast and should fast from all dopamine inducing stuff like coffee and alcohol and sugar and cell phones, anything that keeps you, like sexually perverted, like pornography and masturbation. There's a huge movement called NoFap, where, when I was a kid, we didn't really talk about masturbating. And that's a part of, what keeps us in the dark. Now, this generation is so open about because pornography is so omnipresent, about their struggling with masturbation. And so to practice NoFap, right? Like making a commitment to not rubbing your meat every day, right? Make a commitment to, cutting out junk food, cutting out alcohol. You got to install your own austerity, right? You got to challenge yourself. One of the things that I did when I started becoming awake to this was I would do prolonged fasts, right? Fasting, I would say, I put right at the top of the list. Fasting is at the top of the list to begin to break your mommy bond in addictive ways, because it is one of these things that has been prescribed over time through all cultures, cross-culturally, as an ascetic means for ascension, for growing stronger in the soul. Also, we live in a culture where, plenty has become a paradox, because we have so much that we become gluttons. We're gluttons. We're sick with options and opportunities. And so by limiting that, particularly as it relates to that thing we do more than any, which is eat, really causes an objectivity a separation starts to happen between the life of the soul and the life of the body. And you begin to recognize that you're not a slave to your body. Anything that's effeminate, anything that's material comfort is an attachment to the body. Men, because the movement towards a father is a spiritual movement, have to take it upon ourselves to begin to objectify the body, move above the body, not be ruled by the lower nature, by the lower body. And so the very first step, like I said before, is make peace with your mother and separate emotionally from her. Then you're ready for the austerity. You're ready for the challenge of being a man. And you could do that in a myriad of different ways for yourself these days, right? Even just going on like adventure hikes or, getting involved with jujitsu or something like that. You have to move away and you got to challenge yourself. You got to go through tough stuff. No man becomes a man until he's been challenged. He has to be challenged. And right now we got to challenge ourselves because there's no one there to do it for us. Then the next step is, and this is, once again, the world is against everything I'm saying right here. The world doesn't want you to stop eating, right? Because the industry will suffer. The world doesn't want you to become a strong man. And the world doesn't want you to atone with the Father. What atoning with the Father looks like for us traditionally, cross-culturally, was a movement towards religion. And this is why, for the most part, men created religions. I don't think there are any religions created by women. Men created religions. Men were the ones who needed, in a way, an atonement with God the Father and instruction by him so that we know what to do and who to be. Women don't need that the same way. Women's fate is a little more inscribed in their biology, right? Where the pinnacle of a woman's purpose is to make babies. People don't like to hear that, but biology has granted you that gift. But of course, in our backwards world, that's looked at as something to be denigrated, right? What do you mean women should have babies? Well, in the same way that a man should atone with his father and become the spiritual head of his family, that we have roles. We have very clearly defined roles. And so the man's role is to become that spiritual head, to be the conduit between God the Father and his family. And so this is where a man would, depending on the culture, they would relay the myth, right? The myths that guide the culture. Or as a Christian or a Muslim or Abrahamic religion, then you take on the responsibility of being a father, being a patriarch, being a leader of a small church, a small tribe, which is your family.
Yeah, I definitely see that. I think I tell a lot of men, you're the priest of your home. Your kids are going to know God based on your personality, on how you treat them and what you model for them. And it's no wonder that so many people have turned away when there's no father to set that example.
100%.
So, there's a lot to unpack with what you just shared. It's amazing. And I think there's some really good stuff, actually some stuff that I think is speaking to me too. You know what I mean? That's really, really a neat perspective that I hadn't really thought of. So I appreciate that. The idea of the things we do for comfort being related to the mother, that's really wise. Really wise stuff. So you talk a lot about fasting. You talk about challenging. What is this something that you think that we as men then need to continue to maintain? Like, it's not like you just arrive and become a man. Like, you have to keep doing this, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. If you get the opportunity to break through that mommy addiction barrier and recognize that I need to move into an atonement with God the Father, with my father, literally your literal father, I really didn't get to know myself. I didn't know myself until I began to reconcile with my dad. Like I told you, I used to resent my father because he was too strong. And I grew up in, a beta-fied world where, unless you were respecting women, right, and being the blue pill beta boy that does what the school teacher, what the mommy prefers, rather than listening to the father and maybe not understanding him right away. It wasn't until I began that process of atoning with my father that I began to make any progress at all. So what I'm saying is that wasn't until I was almost 27 years old. It took me a very long time. You know, I think I already had my third child by then. So by mere virtue of even knowing that this exists, you can begin to start making a movement. But here's the thing, the final, or the last stretch of this, if you will, of course, is a stretch towards death, right? Because that is our ultimate fate, that we're going to meet our maker. And so the ongoing process of being a man is to be involved in your religion, right? Begin to understand and study the scripture of your people's origin and the meaning behind it, and the code by which God expects us to live. There's a right and wrong. And it's very masculine to recognize that, to be discerning and to have that decisiveness and those boundaries. In our effeminate world, right? This whole idea that everything's okay, everything's subjective, lukewarm, gray, middle areas, my truth, this whole idea, it's a very effeminate way of thinking. And why I use that word effeminate? Well, it's talking about women. Women are feminine, and they are justly feminine. They should be. Effeminate is a male quality that comes from not taking on the responsibility of being a man and hankering for comfort. We spend too much time wanting our comforts and not wanting to take the responsibility of a man. And so when I say, when I use that word, I just wanted to clarify, we're spending all this time being less than what's expected of us. And so study your faith, study the scriptures of your faith, and live it. That's key. Live it. We live in the West, where Christendom was the prevailing moral code that got us to where we are. But we no longer live our faith. Even so-called Christians, nobody lives their faith. Nobody really does. I'm doing homeschooling with my kids. We started last year and this year. And even today, I recognize, what I do when we start the Bible study, I did Bible study with my children today. I like to play music, like different Christian songs. And there was a girl playing a guitar, a woman playing guitar, singing this beautiful song. She has her head covered in a number of the videos. She's got her head covered. My daughter's like, why does she wear that thing on her head? And I had to explain to them, well, because she's practicing her faith. She's practicing the traditional Christian way for a woman to be. And that is, both men and women show humility, but they do it differently. And a woman does it by covering her head. So that may sound strange in our world today, but there's that. And there are a lot of other things that our world has thrown away that's associated with how to live out your faith. Small things, but significant things.
I think that there's a tremendous value in that, even down to practicing charity, and doing good for people, or like you said, fasting, or spending some time, in devotion and reading and studying and praying and meditating. Right. Those things matter.
How about avoiding fornication? That's a tough one in our world, because the minute you even that word, it irritates people. They don't want to hear about you taking their donuts away. They don't want you to take their goodies away. And if you study the work of E. Michael Jones, he's got a book called Libido Dominandi. He begins to explain the history of domination through sexual liberation. He calls sexual liberation domination, because then people become slaves to their sins. And the minute you become slave to a sin, you're a slave to the demon behind that sin, and you're much more easily manipulated. And that this is demonic. Everything I'm talking about is a spiritual warfare. This is demonic merely by the reaction, the visceral reaction that you get from some people when you bring things like this up, like abortion is wrong. Like you say abortion is wrong in the wrong circle, the fangs come out and the blood on the fingers, they want to destroy you, when all you're simply saying is stop killing your baby out of having sports sex. But they love their sin so much and they feel so justified in it that they want to tear you apart. You said it seems like there's an attack on Christianity today, and you're right, because this is an attack on our values.
Yeah. Hey, Elliot, I ask these questions for all my guests here that I love to hear, and I would really like to hear your perspective on this. Let's say young Elliot walks in the room, 5, 6, 7 years old. And I know we've got to do some space-time bending to make that happen. So don't worry about the science fiction behind it. But young Elliot walks in the room and you've got the opportunity to speak into his life. What do you want him to know?
I'm not sure I would interfere. I would just watch. I would just watch him. I'm as an adult now would just be curious to see what that guy was like, what that little kid was like. But I don't think I would interfere because had I not had all the experience I had up until this moment, I couldn't be standing in the place that I am with the voice that I have because I simply wouldn't know, right? So if anything, I would just give the young boy encouragement. I would say, always keep faith, always stay strong and keep going no matter what, just simple words like that. Just keep going, brother. Keep your eyes open, keep your feet on the ground, and keep trucking, never give up.
Awesome. I think that's good advice to give him. And he probably won't listen to it till he's older anyway.
Right. Yeah. And there that goes, right? Because one of Satan's plots is in his means of destroying the family is to separate the generations. This whole idea of generational separation where, we have Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z, so on and so forth, is a newfangled creation because years past, there a young man, his father and his grandfather, there was more vertical integration. They had more of the same values. But once pop culture took over, instead of the values going vertically, right, like my father said and his father said and their father said, it started going laterally. And it didn't matter what the father said, it was what my friends say, or the TV says, or the music says, pop culture. So each generation is now layered laterally. And with that, there's a separation from the generation above it. No more vertical integration through the family. Now it's complete separation from the family and lateral integration with a so-called generation. And these generations, who schools these generations? The public school system, TikTok, MTV, whatever, you name it, Netflix.
I think about this all the time. When we went to the public school, they stuck us with kids exactly our own age. That was it. 4 years separation max, but it was almost always exactly your age and you were stuck with them. And, then you come across all these guys and they're now adults and they're like, I have no friends my own age. And I'm like, screw that, dude. You've got people that are 5 and 10 years older that you're learning from. And you got people 5 and 10 years younger that you're teaching, you don't need to have friends your own age. Like that's a myth that they indoctrinated into you. So
yeah, I agree.
The next question is this: to the guys that are listening today to the podcast, what is the best advice that you can give them? I mean, you've given some fantastic advice this whole time, but what do you think? And it's okay if it repeats, but what do you think is the best advice that you can give these men?
So we live, like I said, in the age of words, right? You have the men of words, the men of action, the men of pragmatic action, like I spoke about before. What's amazing right now, although we have been so atomized and disintegrated and destroyed as a culture, what's amazing about the internet right now is that we do have access to podcasts like yours, books like The Way of the Superior Man by David Dita, books like Iron John by Robert Bly. The whole, it's going to sound weird that I say this, but it was the seeds for what you and I are doing right now, which is the pickup artist movement that happened maybe, 10, 15 years ago, where these men were frustrated with trying to understand women. They would get online through a series of blogs and chat rooms, began to trade notes on what works and what doesn't work with women. That is so important because we've been told everything the opposite about intersexual dynamics and gender relationships. We're not told the truth. And that's why relationships aren't working. And I applaud those men, right? Not the ones who become promiscuous and, spend their lives dipping in every woman that they can particularly find. I don't even think most men really want that. From my experience, men want a wife. Men want a family. just couldn't figure women out, especially in this diabolically disoriented age. So these are men that got together online and they started talking, and many of them wrote books. And through that, the red pill movement happened, where men started to really have a scientific mindset about who we are and who women are and how it's best to relate to them. And I'll tell you this, that it was through the red pill that I became Christian again, because all these are their old values, their ancient traditional values that helped society sustain itself for thousands of years. Today, they call patriarchy misogyny. Today, they say that, women are better than men. This really is the narrative. It's not about equality. It's about topsy-turvying the world. It's about disrupting the family. And that means you got to feed. The Marxists understood that for there to be societal change, there has to be an oppressor and an oppressed class. It won't work if you don't have an oppressor and oppressed class. All the way we're living today and the negative gut reaction people have to hearing some of the things I say is because we have been so indoctrinated into a backwards way of dealing with men, women, and family. And so we got to go back. So when I say, you asked me the question, what to do? What to do is to study, enlighten yourself, learn, listen to podcasts like this, read books like Rational Male by Rollo Tomasi, and Hard Times Create Strong Men by Stephan Arnio. I'll be having a book come out very soon called Make Men Strong Again. Understand these things. All throughout our culture, this is another strange thing that modernity has shoved on us. They say now, modern people say, a man should just know how to be a man. It doesn't work that way. It never worked that way. Our ancestors understood that boys are instructed into how to be a man. We need to take instruction. We need to learn from people who are teaching young men how to be real men. Anybody who says, you don't need that, or, those guys, there's something wrong with those guys. These are men who will stay trapped in their boyhood for the rest of their lives. We must get around older men, right? Like guys like yourself and I were, 20 years older or more than a lot of the young men that maybe listen to this. Get around older uncle type dudes that are going to tell you the truth because they want to see you succeed.
Yeah, I think that's excellent advice, my friend. So Elliot, for the guys that are listening that want to connect with you, that want to see what you're doing, maybe they want to check out your strength training or the work that you're doing, building kings. I like that phraseology that you use. What's the best way for them to connect with you?
So if you're interested in these kind of conversations, you just look up my name on YouTube, Elliott Hulse. I have a channel. It's just Elliott Hulse. And essentially, I answer questions young men have. That's how this all started. I started out in the gym, and after the workouts, young men would stick around, and they want to hear what old Uncle E has to say about girls or parents or career or school. And so that transferred onto YouTube, and that's what you'll find if you go to my Elliott Hulse channel. If you're into strength training, strongman, powerlifting, you can go to my strength camp channel. This is it right here. And, you'll get to see me training in the gym with my wife. Sometimes I'm training with my children, right? So you get to see, kind of a peek into how I live my life.
Awesome. So I'll make sure to include that information in the show notes as well for anybody that wants to click the link and see what it is that you're doing. I really appreciate having you on the Manlihood ManCast, my friend. You've got some fantastic insights, and I know that it'll be something that'll get our guys thinking, get them talking, get them hopefully taking action.
Yeah, man. Well, thank you for having me, Josh. It was a great show.
Hey, I really appreciate you. Thank you very much.
Hey, man. I see you. I see your fire going out. I see your marriage barely holding on. I know you're broke, wore out, and at the end of your rope. I've been there. It sucks. It sucks the spark right out of you. Till all you have is a pile of wet wood. It feels like it's never gonna burn. I can't fix your problems. I can't make her love you again. I can't lose 50 pounds for you or fill your bank account. But I can remind you of who you are. I can share some of my fire. I can help you make a plan to get your life back on track. So let's go. Let's do this. Let's reignite our lives. There's a lot at stake.
No one wants their marriage to end in divorce. No one wants to wallow in despair or to the dark places that follow. So let's do it. Let's reignite our lives. Let's reignite our passion, our marriage, our health, our career, our dreams, our mindsets. Get reignite today.
It's not often that we get to talk to a bodybuilder and a thought leader of the caliber of Elliott Hulse. He's got an amazing following on Facebook, on Instagram, and on YouTube. Please go check out what he's doing. It's really good stuff. And if you appreciate what we're doing here at Manlihood, I want you to go to manlihood.com/store. Grab yourself a Manlihood t-shirt. We've got some really cool new designs there that can help you step it up. You can wear that t-shirt out and represent the Manlihood brand, which isn't just about me, it's about you. It's about helping you become the person that I know and that I believe that you can become. So please go to the manlihood.com store and support what we're doing here at Manlihood. Listen, guys, I love you. I care about you, and I'll see you next time.
If you want to be a better man, check out our website, manlihood.com, for blogs, videos, and more from our Manlihood team. And you can also join our private Facebook group, Manlihood ManCast, where you can meet up with a band of brothers who will challenge you and help you on your journey of manhood. This episode is produced by Hatcher Media for manlihood.com. Be sure to subscribe and leave us a review on iTunes, YouTube, or wherever you're listening to the show. Tune in again for more of the Manlihood ManCast.